So every quarter, we compile data that we've collected to monitor trends in churches in the US and around the world. But this quarter's report, we're focusing specifically on current staffing trends in churches. And this is staffing trends in churches of various sizes. And related to that, I think we have some fascinating findings to share over these next several minutes. But just to give you kind of the backstory here, first of all, I think you're kind of interested in this information around benchmarks and trends in churches because now nearly 12,000 people are subscribed
Mm.
to our Unstuck Church reports that come out each quarter. And this, the interest too is also reflected in the number of churches taking the surveys associated with this report because this past quarter we had 337 churches participate, and this included churches under 100 in attendance and churches well over 10,000 in attendance. Specifically, though, we collected the data through surveys that we did kind of from early April to early May. So about 3 or 4 weeks there. And then the average in person attendance of all the churches that participated was 820 people. And speaking of attendance, I know we're talking about staffing primarily, Amy,
Hmm.
but we kind of wanted to get a benchmark of what are the churches that we're talking with about staffing, kind of get a sense of who they are. And so we did ask about attendance, and what's encouraging here is that on average of those 337 churches that participated, the average increase in year over year attendance was 23%. That was
Hmm.
the average. And so
Wow.
you can imagine there were a number of churches that were well beyond that, looking at year over year attendance growth. Now, just to put this into context, of course, we're doing surveys with churches here in the spring of 2023 and asking them, tell us the average over the last 12 months, which is 2022 and 2023, and compare that to the 12 months before that, which actually
Hmm.
takes us back into 2021, which that's of
Yeah.
course when we were still dealing with COVID, still dealing with some of the ramifications of the pandemic. So, I mean, attendance numbers now are probably more the normal attendance we should expect
Hmm.
compared to COVID attendance. But still, I think it's an encouraging sign that we're seeing that level of growth in attendance for churches, and it seems to be across all the spectrums of sizes.
Well, with that introduction, let's dive into some of the findings from this quarter's report. Tony, let's begin with looking at overall staffing levels. We've talked about a couple of benchmarks related to staffing levels in the past: attendance to full time equivalent staff. We've looked at staffing budget as a percentage of the overall budget. What did you learn about both of those benchmarks with the most recent survey data?
Yeah, let's take the first one, and this is staffing levels compared to attendance. And just to help you here, because this does involve some math,
Hmm.
what we first of all have to help churches calculate the number of full time equivalent staff people that they have, and the way you do that, if you want to do this math for your church, is obviously a full time person equals one full time equivalent. But then you also probably have part time staff working for you. And what you can do is combine all of the part time hours that all of your part time staff work in a given week and divide by 40. And that will give you a full time equivalent for your part time employee. All right. So we've worked through the math. What we found in the surveys is that the average church now employs one full time equivalent staff person for every 59 people in attendance. And
Hey,
by
that's
the way,
progress, Tony.
that
That's
is
progress.
progress. That number includes all staff, so both ministry
Yeah.
staff and support staff. So administrative staff, facility staff, things like that. This is all total staff numbers. Um, there was some disparity between smaller churches and larger churches.
Hmm.
In churches less than 200 people in attendance, those churches averaged 45 people in attendance for every full time equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
The very largest churches, in this case, churches averaging more than 1,000 people, had one full time equivalent for every 77 people in attendance.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw that number, I was really encouraged because, Amy, as you know, kind of our benchmark for churches at the Unstuck Group is to encourage them to get to one full time equivalent for every 75 people in attendance. And right
Mm-hmm.
now, large churches seem to be there. Of course, we continue to challenge churches. If you can push to a higher ratio here, if possible, you should do it. In fact, as an example, 12 of the largest churches actually exceeded one full time equivalent for every 100 people in
Mm-hmm.
attendance, which means those churches really are focused on raising up, building volunteer teams, raising up volunteer leaders, and really mobilizing the volunteers in their church to engage the ministry that other churches might be hiring staff to accomplish. The second benchmark we look at here related to staffing has to do with money. And the
Mm-hmm.
question is, are churches investing, what amount of money are churches investing in their staff compared to the overall budget? And what we found here is that churches are investing more than half their giving in their ministry staff. And specifically, the average staff budget now is 52% of the overall ministry budget. And
Mm-hmm.
that, by the way, when we talk about staff budget, includes salaries, it includes payroll taxes, it includes any benefits that you're giving to your employees. Again, some differences between larger churches and smaller churches. Larger churches are actually investing a smaller portion of their ministry budget on staff. But here, just to help give some guidance, the benchmark that we encourage churches to shoot for is anywhere between 45 and 55% on the high end. And so the average for all churches is, closer to the middle. Actually, for the largest churches, 1,000 or more, it's exactly in the middle. The average is 50% right
Mm-hmm.
now. But when we look at those larger churches, I found several from the survey data that are actually investing less than 40% of their ministry budget in their staffing. And that's encouraging because that just
Mm-hmm.
creates all kinds of flexibility then for the church to be investing resources and expanding their mission in their community.
Mm-hmm. That's great insights. Tony, this quarter's Unstuck Church report is full of interesting information that takes a look at staffing trends in churches. So we certainly can't cover everything today, but maybe we can finish just by looking at some of the staffing practices churches are leveraging, to increase the health and the performance of their team.
Yeah, Amy, I'd like to do this, and I'm kind of curious to get your reaction on some of these as well. So I'm going to kind of do these rapid fire, and then feel free to chime in as I'm running through these. So quickly, I mean, one of the practices we looked at was just the number of churches engaging in succession right now, and
Mm-hmm.
found that 1 in 4 churches is actively planning for pastoral succession. Any
Yeah,
surprise for you in that?
doesn't surprise me at all. That's probably the exact math I would have chosen based on the churches we've been serving. They're either just came through one or they're about to pull the trigger to head into one. Mm-hmm.
Another one, more than half of churches have been through some staff restructuring within the last 2 years. And I kind of alluded to this at the top of today's episode, but I want you to feel comfortable as you're looking at your structure that it's okay to make changes. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
the largest growing churches, it really is almost every 2 years they're kind of revisiting their structure. Another practice, this was encouraging. More than 3/4 of churches have developed written values or
Mm.
behaviors to shape
Mm-hmm.
team culture. And Amy, that's something that we help churches with. Do you want to
Yep.
just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I like that you say values or behaviors. What I find is that a lot of churches have these values written down, but they aren't the distinct behaviors that define how this organization acts and behaves. And with the churches I work with, when we shift from values to behaviors, it's a game changer, especially, by the way, for the lead pastor. They're usually the ones most excited about that because they want it to have teeth. They want it to be, um, what can I say? They want to be able to evaluate it. Do we have team members who are behaving the way we behave, living, out the mission the way we live out the mission? So it doesn't surprise me that 3/4 of them have them written. I think my question would be for our listeners: do you just have values that talk about things that really everyone on your team should have because they're in ministry? Or are they really the distinctive behaviors that define how you act as a team?
Yeah, I love that challenge, Amy. Again, in the full report, several other staffing practices. Let me highlight this last one, though. And for some of you pastors, you're going to think, well, of course. For about half of you, apparently, you might want to sit down for this one because the survey information, we found that about half of senior pastors are empowered to hire and fire all staff without board approval. Now, this practice helps to position, obviously, the senior pastor and their other staff leaders to have full accountability for the health and performance of the team. And senior pastors of large churches with 500 or more in attendance are almost twice as likely to have this authority as pastors of smaller churches do. And
Hmm.
Amy, I know that for some, you just heard that and you thought, why would we ever let the senior pastor have that much responsibility and authority? And others of you are listening and thinking, how in the world can you pastor
Duh.
a church and lead a staff team and not have that
Right.
responsibility? I will just say this is one of those areas where you have, for churches, if you want to continue to reach more people for Jesus and you actually want to build a team that's healthy and high performing, you have to give your senior pastors this
Hmm.
control and this authority. And we see it time and time again where it tends to be an issue is around churches that have dealt with some issue in the past, and they feel like they have to really hold the reins on their senior pastor and put a lot of controls and a lot of accountability in place. And I would just say, man, if you've hired a senior pastor that you can't trust to make people decisions, you probably hired the wrong senior pastor. And I,
Hmm.
I say that because I know for most of you listening, you have the capacity to do this and you would handle that responsibility well in a healthy way. But I just want you to hear and feel free to pass this on to your board. You need that responsibility to build a healthy, thriving team.